At 66, Jim Kelly stands in a place few legends ever reach, a quiet stretch of life where glory and pain finally balance on the same scale. For decades, he carried the weight of 4 Super Bowl heartbreaks, the unspoken expectations of a city that worshipped his every throw, and the shadows that followed him long after the lights faded. Fans thought they knew his story. They believed the legend was complete. Yet behind the cheers and behind the image of a fearless quarterback lived a man wrestling with truths he never allowed the world to see. These truths did not come from the games everyone remembers. They came from the moments no camera captured, the doubts he buried, the fractures inside the locker room, and the battles off the field that demanded more courage than any blitz he ever faced. Buffalo adored him. The Bills Mafia carried him. Still, there were 6 secrets he kept guarded, 6 pieces of his past that shaped his legacy in ways few ever imagined. Now, at an age where reflection replaces rivalry, Jim Kelly is finally ready to lift the veil. His greatest victories were forged in silence. His darkest nights were survived alone. What he reveals changes everything we thought we knew about him. The question that remains is simple. Why did a man loved by an entire city feel compelled to hide the most defining truths of his life? Before the 6 hidden truths can be understood, the world around Jim Kelly must be rebuilt exactly as it was. He did not simply arrive in Buffalo. He was forged by a journey that tested his resolve long before he ever put on a Bills jersey. Born in Pennsylvania and shaped by a childhood defined by toughness and discipline, Kelly grew up in an environment where pain was a companion and expectations always ran high. Football was more than a sport. It became his escape and his identity. At the University of Miami, he developed the competitive fire that would one day define an entire city. He learned to lead with defiance and to trust only what he could control. Those early years planted the seeds for both his triumphs and his hidden struggles. When he was drafted, the future seemed bright, yet it never followed a straight line. Choosing to begin his career in the USFL, Kelly experienced early fame and early friction. He learned how quickly a locker room can turn into a battlefield and how leadership often demands sacrifices no one sees. When the USFL collapsed and Buffalo reclaimed him, his arrival was not met with ease. He joined a franchise hungry for hope and desperate for a savior. The weight of that longing settled on his shoulders the moment he stepped into the huddle. Buffalo was unlike any other football city. It embraced him with a devotion bordering on myth, but that devotion carried expectations that could crush even the strongest spirit. Kelly became the heartbeat of the K-gun offense, orchestrating a unit that moved with speed and precision. His relationship with Marv Levy and Bill Polian helped shape one of the most dynamic teams of its era. Yet within that success lived constant strain. Teammates clashed, egos collided, pressure intensified. The emotional cost of chasing perfection grew heavier each year. Then came the run that defined him. 4 straight Super Bowls, 4 straight heartbreaks. To the world, these losses became a narrative of disappointment. To Kelly, they became a private storm, one he protected behind a confident stare and a commanding voice. He never allowed fans to see the toll. He never admitted how deeply each failure carved into him. Those wounds stayed hidden behind the victories, the celebrations, and the public image of a relentless competitor. Buffalo adored him more with each passing season. The colder the winter, the tighter the city held on to him. Yet, admiration can sometimes isolate rather than comfort. The more the Bills Mafia believed they understood him, the more Kelly concealed. Behind the legendary offense and the roaring stadium chants stood a man who knew that leadership meant absorbing the pain, so others did not have to. Understanding Jim Kelly begins here. In the world that built him, tested him, and forced him to guard truths too heavy to share. Truths that would one day define the man far more than the games he played. Jim Kelly's story cannot be told without acknowledging the teammate who once stood closest to him and yet became the first quiet fracture in his professional world. This was a man respected across the locker room, a player whose own intensity matched Kelly's fire, someone expected to move in complete sync with the quarterback who led the offense. To the public, their relationship looked strong, a partnership built on shared ambition and mutual trust. Inside the walls of the stadium, it was far more complicated. This teammate carried his own beliefs about leadership and accountability, and he believed that Kelly's voice, as powerful as it was, sometimes drowned out the voices of others. He never said it publicly, but he questioned whether Kelly's approach united the locker room or intimidated it. The origins of the conflict were subtle. It began with disagreements about play-calling moments when Kelly demanded a tempo that others struggled to match. It deepened as the team surged toward its first Super Bowl berth, a season filled with pressure that magnified every misunderstanding. This teammate felt that Kelly pushed too hard without stopping to see who was falling behind. Kelly saw hesitation as weakness and believed urgency was the only path to victory. Their philosophies collided in meetings on the practice field and occasionally in the huddle. As the stakes grew, so did the tension. What started as professional disagreement evolved into a personal divide, one that neither man addressed directly. Each believed the other needed to change. Neither did. The breaking point arrived during a crucial late-season game, a moment burned permanently into Kelly's memory. The Bills were in a must-win situation, their playoff hopes hanging in the balance. The offense faced a third, and along the stadium, roaring the cold, cutting through every breath. Kelly barked the play and expected instant execution. Instead, he sensed hesitation from his teammate, a pause that shattered the rhythm of the huddle. Kelly repeated the call with sharper force. The hesitation lingered. The ball was snapped and the play collapsed. What followed was a sideline confrontation. The cameras partially caught a flash of anger that stunned even veteran players. Kelly shouted. His teammate shouted back. Their frustrations spilled into full view, and though the team won that day, something essential between them broke. Their partnership never fully repaired. Inside Kelly, the moment left a scar. He knew leadership demanded control, but control demanded unity. This incident became a private reminder that even the strongest teams crack when trust falters. For the rest of his career, he carried that memory, the image of a teammate he respected, looking at him with a mixture of disappointment and defiance. It was a truth he kept to himself, a truth he never explained to the fans who believed every player marched behind him without question. The cold truth is simple. He never forgot that day. And he never fully forgave the hesitation that exposed the fragile edge of his command. There was a coach in Jim Kelly's career who believed deeply in structure, discipline, and control, a man whose philosophy stood in stark contrast to Kelly's instinctive, fast-paced brand of football. This coach had earned his reputation through precision. He valued scripted plays, clean execution, and an offense that moved like a machine. Kelly valued freedom, improvisation, and the ability to read a defense at full speed. On paper, the two were supposed to complement each other. In reality, they clashed from the moment Kelly walked into the meeting room with a confidence that filled every corner of the building. The coach respected his talent, but privately, he wondered whether Kelly's style was sustainable or dangerous, a gamble that threatened the order he built his career upon. The conflict took root early. It began with disagreements over audibles. Kelly wanted the authority to change plays at the line without restriction. The coach wanted those changes within a narrow framework, controlled and predictable. Each film session sharpened the divide. Kelly argued that instincts win games. The coach argued that discipline prevents losses. Their conversations grew louder and more pointed as the season progressed. The coach believed that Kelly's fast-tempo offense created unnecessary chaos. Kelly believed the coach's caution slowed the team down when speed was their greatest weapon. Neither man was entirely wrong. Neither believed he should bend. The defining moment came during a game that demanded boldness. The Bills trailed late. The crowd pressed in with desperation. Kelly saw a defense misaligned and knew instantly that the right audible would break the game open. He signaled the change, confident that the moment belonged to instinct. On the sideline, the coach erupted, waving his arms and shouting as he saw Kelly abandon the original call. The ball was snapped, and Kelly delivered a strike downfield, a completion that ignited the stadium. But something else happened too. The coach slammed his headset on the bench, furious that Kelly had defied him on national television. The tension carried into the locker room, where silence filled the space between them. Teammates avoided eye contact, sensing a fracture far deeper than a disagreement about a single play. For Kelly, the incident cut in two directions. The success of the play affirmed his belief that instinct was his greatest gift. The anger from the coach reminded him that leadership sometimes isolates rather than empowers. He realized that no matter how many games he won, some people would always view his style as reckless, even dangerous. It became a hidden truth he carried for years, the knowledge that one of the coaches tasked with guiding him forward never fully trusted the way he saw the field. In Kelly's private reflections, the cold truth remained clear. The victory belonged to the team, but the divide between them never healed, and the criticism stayed with him long after the cheers had faded. Every great quarterback has a rival who forces him to confront the parts of himself he would rather ignore. For Jim Kelly, that rival stood across the field wearing different colors, commanding his own team, with a calmness that contrasted sharply with Kelly's fiery urgency. This quarterback was celebrated for precision, for patience, for a methodical style that slowed the game to a pace he controlled effortlessly. Fans loved comparing the two, turning every matchup into a referendum on their legacies. What no one knew was that this rival awakened a fear inside Kelly that he never admitted publicly. It was not fear of losing. It was fear of being overshadowed by someone who represented everything Kelly was not. Their conflict did not begin with trash talk or personal animosity. It began with a narrative shaped by the media. Analysts praised the rival's decision-making and discipline while criticizing Kelly for being too emotional or too aggressive. Each article cut deeper than Kelly let on. The coverage framed him as reckless, while casting his rival as the model of composure. Kelly fought against those labels every time he stepped onto the field. Their battles became more than games. They were tests of identity. Kelly believed he had to prove he belonged among the elite, and that defeating this rival was the only way to silence the doubts surrounding him. The defining confrontation came during a nationally televised showdown late in the season, a game loaded with playoff implications. Snow fell in thick sheets, swirling under the stadium lights. The crowd roared as Kelly led his offense to the line. On the opposite sideline, the rival quarterback stood calm, his expression unshaken by the elements. The contrast was striking. Kelly played with volcanic intensity, barking commands and driving his teammates with urgency. His rival played as though the storm did not exist, completing pass after pass with mechanical rhythm. As the game unfolded, the pressure mounted. Kelly forced throws that normally came easily to him, trying to match the rival's control rather than playing his own game. A late interception cemented the narrative he feared most. The rival walked off the field with victory and with another headline framing him as the superior leader. That night haunted Kelly. He relived the interception, repeatedly questioning every decision he made. He realized the pressure did not come from the rival. It came from within, from the need to be seen as equal or better than a man whose style drew praise in the areas critics claimed Kelly lacked. It created a private resentment. He never voiced a rivalry, fueled not by hatred, but by insecurity. It exposed a truth he kept hidden even from teammates. He feared that no matter how many games he won, comparisons to that rival would always diminish his achievements. The cold truth is that the rivalry never died. It lived quietly inside him, shaping the fire that drove him and the doubt that followed him long after the final whistle. There was a moment in Jim Kelly's career when the greatest threat he faced did not come from a defender or a rival quarterback. It came from someone sitting in an office above the field, a team executive with the authority to reshape the roster, redirect the franchise, and redefine Kelly's role, without ever stepping onto the turf. This executive was known for his calculated decisions, his willingness to make bold moves, and his belief that no player, not even a franchise quarterback, was irreplaceable. To the public, the relationship appeared respectful. Behind closed doors, Kelly sensed tension, a persistent feeling that his future in Buffalo was never as secure as fans assumed. The conflict began not with a dramatic confrontation, but with subtle signs that grew louder each season. It started when the executive questioned Kelly's durability after a series of injuries. Then came internal discussions about investing in a young quarterback, someone who could sit behind Kelly but also potentially succeed him. These conversations were never meant to be public, yet whispers reach players eventually. Kelly heard enough to know that loyalty had limits and that the franchise he carried on his back was preparing for contingencies that made him uneasy. He understood football was a business. Still, the idea that someone viewed him as a fading asset struck deeper than any hit he ever took on the field. The pivotal moment arrived during an off-season meeting that began as a routine discussion about offensive adjustments. Kelly entered expecting conversation about new formations and personnel changes. Instead, he was met with a tone that felt cold and transactional. The executive presented data on declining efficiency during late-season games, pointed out missed opportunities, and suggested that the team might need to evaluate all options at the quarterback position. The words were clinical, yet devastating. Kelly kept his composure but felt the ground shift beneath him. For the first time, he realized the team he devoted his life to was contemplating a future without him. The situation escalated when the executive pursued a high-profile free agent quarterback, a move that leaked to the media and ignited speculation. Fans dismissed it quickly. Kelly did not. He felt the tension of a shadow stretching across his legacy. He recognized that the franchise he helped elevate was now questioning whether his best years were behind him. The emotional impact lingered through the next season. Kelly played with renewed intensity, not just to win, but to prove he was still the heartbeat of the franchise. Each touchdown became a statement. Each victory pushed the doubts further into the background. Yet privately, he carried the memory of that meeting, the moment he felt replaceable. It became one of the hidden truths he rarely shared, a reminder that even legends walk with uncertainty. The cold truth is that the executive never fully abandoned the idea of moving on from him. Kelly understood that reality and used it as fuel, but the sting never faded. It lived quietly beneath the surface, shaping his drive and deepening the emotional cost of every game he played. The final and most powerful truth Jim Kelly carried was not tied to a teammate, a coach, a rival, or an executive. It was tied to an entire city. Buffalo embraced him with a devotion unmatched in the league. It lifted him through victories, stood with him through heartbreaks, and immortalized him long before his career ended. Yet within that love lived a burden only he could feel. Kelly understood that he was not simply a quarterback. He was the symbol of hope in a city desperate for triumph, a city that poured its identity into the success of its football team. The love was real and profound. The pressure was equally overwhelming. The conflict emerged slowly. Kelly felt it in the cheers that followed him everywhere, in the children who wore his number, in the adults who told him he carried their dreams. He felt it in every conversation where fans spoke about the team's destiny as though he alone could change it. When the Bills began their historic run of Super Bowl appearances, the expectations grew to a magnitude no player could fully bear. Buffalo did not just want a championship. It needed one. Kelly knew that with every win, he was bringing the city closer to redemption, and with every loss, he was reopening wounds generations old. The responsibility became a silent weight pressing against his chest. The defining moment came after the first Super Bowl loss, a night when the stadium lights had long dimmed and the world moved on to celebrate another team. Kelly sat alone for a moment in the quiet, surrounded by uniforms tossed on the floor and voices fading into the distance. He felt the silence of failure echoing around him. He imagined the faces of Buffalo fans waking up to heartbreak, and he believed unfairly but truthfully that he had failed them. Each subsequent trip to the Super Bowl deepened the emotional toll. The more the team accomplished, the more Kelly feared letting the city down again. After the fourth loss, he stood on the field, listening to the cheers of the opposing crowd. In that moment, he felt the full weight of Buffalo's hope implode inside him. He walked off the field, carrying a burden too heavy to share a burden, born not from disappointment in himself, but from the belief that he had broken the heart of the city that loved him most. This truth stayed hidden for years. Kelly never blamed Buffalo. He adored its people, its resilience, its raw loyalty. Yet he privately wrestled with the knowledge that the city's belief in him was both his greatest strength and his greatest source of pain. The cold truth is simple and devastating. The one force that lifted him higher than he ever imagined was also the force that left the deepest scars. He never truly forgave himself for not delivering the championship Buffalo deserved. There was one person Jim Kelly rarely mentioned. Someone who never appeared in highlight reels or interviews and whose name was almost never spoken outside the team facility. He was not a star, not a rival, not a coach, and not an executive. He was a quiet friend inside the locker room, a role player whose contributions never reached the headlines, but whose presence shaped Kelly's journey in ways far deeper than any statistic could measure. This man understood Kelly's fire better than anyone. He recognized the weight Kelly carried long before the world ever did, and he saw the cracks forming beneath the surface. Their connection grew during long practice days when tension ran high and pressure felt unrelenting. While others admired Kelly's confidence, this friend saw the loneliness behind it. He listened when Kelly needed to vent and challenged him when he drifted too far into frustration. He reminded Kelly that leadership did not mean perfection, and that the mistakes haunting him were not failures, but part of the path he walked. There was a night after a crushing loss when Kelly sat in near silence, drowning in doubt. This friend placed a hand on his shoulder and said only one sentence, a sentence Kelly never forgot. He told him that Buffalo believed in him not because he always won, but because he never stopped fighting. In that moment, Kelly felt the storm inside him ease. This friend never sought recognition. He never asked for credit. Yet Kelly quietly acknowledged that without him, he might have lost himself in the weight of expectation. It became one of the most meaningful truths he kept hidden. The cold truth is that sometimes the greatest impact comes from the people no one sees, and this friend kept Kelly standing when everything around him threatened to break. As Jim Kelly reached the later chapters of his life, the truths he carried began to take on new meaning. The rivalries, the conflicts, the pressures, and the expectations all wove themselves into a tapestry far more complex than the narrative fans believed for decades. His story was never just about football. It was about endurance in the face of unrelenting adversity. It was about a man pushed to the edge by forces both external and internal, who somehow found the strength to stand tall, even when the ground beneath him felt ready to collapse. The conflicts he faced with teammates, coaches, and executives shaped the leader he became. Every disagreement, every argument in the huddle, and every moment of doubt strengthened the spine he needed to carry a franchise on his back. Those tensions were not signs of weakness. They were proof of how deeply he cared. Kelly learned early that leadership demanded sacrifice and that the weight of responsibility rarely distributed itself evenly. When his authority was questioned, he felt it personally, yet he continued pushing forward because he understood that the team's success depended on his conviction. His fire became the engine of the Bills, propelling them through seasons that might have broken lesser teams. His rivalry with the quarterback, who represented everything he wasn't, created an internal battle he never fully escaped. That rivalry forced him to confront the insecurities he buried beneath confidence and charisma. It sharpened him. It humbled him. It reminded him that greatness is never a straight path, but a climb filled with comparisons, doubts, and the constant fear of falling short. Kelly learned to turn that fear into fuel to meet each new season with renewed determination. It was in these silent emotional battles that his resilience was born. The resilience fans would one day celebrate not just in stadiums, but in hospitals and recovery rooms where the stakes were infinitely higher. Yet nothing shaped him more profoundly than the expectations of Buffalo. The city loved him fiercely, and that love carried a cost only he could understand. Each Super Bowl loss carved deeper wounds than he admitted. He felt responsible for breaking the heart of every fan who believed salvation was within reach. Those losses haunted him not because of what they meant for his legacy, but because of what they meant for the people he represented. Still, the city's unwavering belief became his anchor. Buffalo taught him that loyalty does not disappear when victory fades. It endures, it grows stronger, it transforms pain into purpose. The quiet friend who stood by his side reminded him that vulnerability was not a flaw, but a foundation. When Kelly entered the most difficult battle of his life, long after stadium lights dimmed and crowds dispersed, that lesson became his lifeline. His fight against cancer demanded a courage far greater than anything football ever asked of him. The world saw the speeches, the smiles, and the public strength. Only a few understood the private fear that returned each night when the hospital room fell silent. In facing that struggle, Kelly confronted the deepest truth of all. His legacy would not be defined by championships won or lost. It would be defined by the way he lived through hardship. In the final measure, Jim Kelly's legacy transcends football. He stands as a symbol of perseverance, a testament to the strength it takes to carry a city's hope, withstand a lifetime of pressure, and rise again after every fall. Buffalo remembers him not for perfection, but for resilience, not for titles, but for heart. His career, marked by brilliance and heartbreak, became a blueprint for how to face adversity with dignity and courage. His life beyond football proved that his greatest victories came long after the final whistle. The hidden truths he revealed at 66 do not diminish his legend. They deepen it. They remind the world that even the strongest heroes carry scars and that vulnerability can be as powerful as triumph. Jim Kelly's story endures because it reflects the struggle of an entire city and the unbreakable bond between a man and the people who believed in him through every storm. Jim Kelly's journey leaves us with questions that linger long after the story fades. His struggles, his triumphs, and the 6 hidden truths that shaped his path reveal a man far more complex than the legend many believed they understood. They show a leader who carried the weight of expectation with courage and humility. They show a fighter who endured heartbreak not once but repeatedly and still found the strength to rise. They show a human being whose vulnerability became as defining as his victories. And now the story belongs to you. What part of his journey resonated most deeply? Was it the tension with those who challenged him, the rivalry that exposed his fears, or the immense pressure from a city that demanded everything? Or was it the quiet truth that heroes often walk through darkness long before they step into the light? These questions matter because they invite us to reflect on what greatness truly means. It is not perfection, it is persistence. It is the willingness to keep fighting even when the world believes the story is already written. If the hidden truths of Jim Kelly's life opened a new window into the man behind the helmet, consider what other stories in football's golden age remain untold. There are legends whose greatest battles happened far from the field, men whose legacies were built not only on power and talent, but on the scars they chose to hide. If you want to uncover more stories like this, subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths. Join a community that looks beyond the highlights, beyond the trophies, and into the moments that defined the men who shaped the sport. The next truth is waiting.